Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session here, Rise of Big Data Governance Insight on the Emerging Trend from Active Open Source Initiatives. So imagine a number of you saw the presentation, the keynote from Mandy this morning, and maybe also the presentation just before this downstairs that talked about the open metadata initiative at work and the work happening at Apache Atlas. That was very much focused on the technical side. We're going to talk a little bit more on the business side of the house here. Doing introductions for both of ourselves here. My name is John Mertic. I'm the Director of Program Management for ODPi on behalf of the Linux Foundation. And so I help with the day-to-day operations of ODPi, on which the Open Metadata Program is a part of. And I'll introduce Marina.
I will not make you try to pronounce my last name.
Yep.
My name is Marina Strelchuk. I work for ING, and I'm an information architect. I hope that most of you heard of ING, and most of you know that we are a bank. And it might be a little bit weird that I'm standing here and talking about governance, the open standards, and also open source. But if you think about it, ING, as well as companies that you represent here, have pretty similar challenges and issues. All of us have quite a huge number of technologies that we use, and all of us face challenges when it comes to using data in an effective way. We have to answer the questions of, for example, how do I find the data that I need? And how do I know that I understand exactly what I have in my company? How do I make sure that the quality is at a proper level? And how also I check and ensure that this data is used for appropriate purposes? Next to these questions that help us to make decisions, we have a bit more questions from our friends in regulation. So everybody, at least in Europe, is aware of GDPR coming over. So in addition, we have a number of questions for the purpose and the lineage around it. And that is why, because of these challenges and questions that we have to answer, we think that metadata and having an open standard is quite important. I would like to start us to think about a perfect world, a perfect situation. Imagine that you in your enterprise can have an enterprise catalog to which you can connect and search for data from the whole enterprise. And it doesn't really matter where exactly this data resides. Now, here think about not one big database. That's not going to work. But rather think of peer-to-peer exchanges between different metadata and data tools that enable us to see what we have in our company and to understand what exactly we can use. And also, very often when we think about metadata, we think about quite technical aspects. For example, technical schemas that sit on top of the actual databases or size. However, when you think about metadata, it brings you much more than that. Think about owners, think about valid values, the purpose, the lineage around it. Also things like policies and classifications that apply to these data items. Now we have this really nice enterprise data catalogs that we can connect and search. On top of it, imagine that you have an ability to connect any vendor tool that you would need to into this catalog and search for metadata and data that is fit for the purpose. This is quite nice because in our enterprises and companies, we have different departments that use different tools and focus on different purposes. So we can pick the best-in-class dashboarding tool or data scientist tool And instead of going through the lengthy and quite hideous process of populating the metadata store that this tool comes with from the scratch, all you can do is to use a connector to connect to the open metadata layer and consume metadata and data that you need for your purposes. More than that, imagine that you can automate the metadata generation and description. So when we have new systems that come into our enterprise, platforms or tools, the metadata that comes with them can automatically populate a metadata repository. Also, you can deal with things like automated exception analysis and anything around the new data that you receive. These 3 slides describe a perfect world. And it also illustrates the benefits and values that open metadata and metadata brings to you. And it allows for metadata exchange to be possible between different repositories, as well when you look at the tools as well as metadata repositories. And we do believe that the true value of metadata, open metadata standard, lies in the fact that it can be developed in an open source initiative. In other words, if we want to achieve this perfect world where we have all these benefits, we need to have a data-driven enterprises that have the same challenges and issues to collaborate together and to build this open metadata standard. Over the next 25 minutes or so, me and John will look together deeper into the metadata problem, into this open ecosystem and what does it bring and how do we build it, and also what benefits do we have for data governance professionals and subject matter experts. To start with, a very simple but very important question. Why do we need metadata to start with? Well, I will give you, there's much more reasons, but I'll give you 3 that is quite important one. First of all is metadata allows us to use data that was created in specific application outside that application. So I'll give an example from ING. We have a huge number of data. And as well, we have a huge number of applications and systems that produce, process, modify, and consume data. Every time we want to integrate one system with another system, we go through sort of the same exercise. We have to answer the questions of what is this data? How do we interpret it? Is there specific things in this data that notify us that we need to treat it in a specific way? Now, if you have rich metadata around the data that you own in your company, these questions would be answered automatically. The second one is metadata tells us about the structure and the context of the data, content of the data that we have. So here think about, again, the structure, the values, the previous projects or purposes that this data was used for, and any policies or limitations that apply to this data. Now, this gives you enough information to make a good judgment call if this data set is right for this purpose. And third and very important point, also because we have a lot of data and doing the governance manually is not a best option. You probably have to have an army of the governance people working 24 hours. So this metadata, rich metadata, gives us an ability to automate the governance process. We look at the purpose of the data that it was collected for. We look at the classifications or any policies or business actions that are around it. And having this information, we can build governance enforcement engines that can process and protect and police the use of the data. Now, that was a perfect world, and our reality is a little bit different. To start with, many platforms simply do not support metadata to start with. On the other hand, we have quite a lot of proprietary tools that have a metadata support and have certain governance actions around it. However, those tools have sliced and limited view, so they are focused on only a certain area. And there is no tool that allows you to do everything that you need. Also, there is an assumption that all the tools that you use come from the same suite, which means that, well, they are able to understand the language, the metadata model, and the governance actions around it. And this is simply not realistic in current technology stage. And I told you about the nice enterprise catalog. Now, to have this whole company view on data, or federated view on the data, in current situation with different technologies and metadata tools that do not talk to each other, is quite an expensive and very complicated effort that do not guarantee 100% a success. So, today's reality in one picture. We have number of data sources that connect. Some of them have metadata repositories that have metadata and describes what exactly is there. But as you can see, they are also fragmented, and some of them do not actually have metadata description to start with. Also, we have different tools, the BI tools, reporting tools, CDO tools, and some of them can connect only to certain sliver of data. And now, if you are limiting yourself to a certain area, for example, risk, that might work. But if you have a tool that you want to use and consume data that comes from different sources, that poses a problem. The challenges and this kind of perfect world where we want to live in gave a birth to the Metadata Governance Manifesto. This is 5 rules that generally describes what we are trying to achieve and what we expect from open metadata standard. First of all, the metadata should be generated automatically. Namely, with the moment that your data is created, the metadata should be there. The second one, that the metadata management should be everywhere. And again, in a ideal situation, you should not have any data in your company that is not described and understood, and as a result, you do not know how to treat it and use it. The third one, well, we want all our tools and our people to make decisions based on data. And to make that possible, we need to know that we understand what data we use and that we make correct decisions. And that's why all the tools have to have out-of-the-box connection to the metadata. Again, this fourth one, and very dear and near to at least the financial sector, is governance and data protection. Because we have this rich context from metadata, we can automate the governance rules based on this metadata. And the fifth, again, in a perfect world, any tools or systems that used for maintenance, discovery, or processing, or creating data should use metadata and create metadata to govern what is happening. So we had a perfect world where we're moving. We saw that the current situation is not that happy. So what needs to change in order for us to have this perfect world? Well, we need an open metadata layer. And this layer consists of two main components. First component called Open Metadata Repository Services. And its main function is to allow metadata repositories to exchange metadata and to be in sync. So for example, in ING, we use a IBM metadata repository called IGC. And we also have Atlas when you have Hadoop. So if we have data item, say customer number, and you change classification of this business term or data item from C3 to C4, so it becomes very, very confidential, what you want to have is to propagate this change around the whole system. So any rules that, or any systems that deal with this current item know that we need to treat this in a specific way. On the other hand, as I mentioned, we have different departments and they need different tools. And that's the top layer. So it's a bit different layer called Open Metadata Access Services. And why it is different is because it is more tool or use specific. What I mean by this is that different tools, for example, governance office or CDO office, would use a specific OMAS, specific set of APIs that would focus on specific data items and metadata items that are relevant for this tool. So in CDO office, for example, you would concern about classification and data assets and any policies or governance actions that you need to take on this item. On the other hand, if you have, for example, the BI reporting tool, the set of APIs would be concerned with, say, metadata models and other reports that already exist in your company. And another benefit of this is that having this ability to connect to the open metadata layer allows you for a bigger variety of tools that you can use from big and small vendors. So you can focus on making the best and user tool as it can be, and do not spend horrendously long times on working on metadata repositories. You can just connect to this layer and be able to consume the metadata that already exists in a company in general. And at the beginning I said, well, it's governance, it's open metadata standard, and it is an open source initiative. Now, we don't want to have only a good idea of a standard, but rather we wanted to have also a reference and practical implementation of what we are doing. For that purpose, we selected Apache Atlas as an open source project on which we built and updated to make the open source or the open metadata standard possible. Initially, Apache Atlas had a good base, and there is 3 key areas on which we extended. So I touched a few of them already, and you can see the business value. So that's the ability of your company to adopt any tool and user tool that best suitable for the purpose and for your situation. All those tools, such as, again, data scientists, they always want to use specific to them tools, and CDO office, all they have to do is to connect and to the access services, which is already native in Atlas Metadata Server. On the other hand, we have this metadata highway. So by metadata highway, we mean this ability to exchange metadata between different metadata technologies and repositories. And another area that also we're working on is automation. As I mentioned, the stewardship and governance, and also an ability to generate metadata from the data that is dynamically created in the companies is not something you want to do manually. So that's another focus point for us, is how do we have these discovery services that focus on the systems that you have already and on the data that comes into your ecosystem, and help you to analyze what you have, and also raise an exception if something is going wrong. So it's not only standard and design, it's not only an idea to put it in a reference implementation. A lot of work has been done already. So you can see here the green area is a good area. It's one that we already worked on, and the base initial implementation is in place. So the open metadata repository services, which will allow IBM tool, IGC, which is a metadata repository, exchange metadata with Atlas, as an example. Also, we focused on 2 OMASes. So this is a custom APIs and event-based components. And the 2 main ones that you can see here is an asset catalog. So asset catalog is a component that talks to the Search UI. In Search UI, you have your business users who come and say, well, I'm interested in making a recommendation system, and I would like to see what information I have on employee, for example. And you type employee, and you want to see what is there on metadata level. So this is an asset catalog that connects to the open metadata repository services and issues the federated query and picks everything that is relevant for you, given you have permission to do that. Because again, there is a governance in place. And we have also information view, which is a custom component for virtualization layer. We say that, well, having the business view for our users, business users, to understand what exactly they're looking at is very important. So instead of exposing very technical names such as KN, which can be customer number, customer name, or whatever database administrator decided to call it, we say, well, this item is customer number, and this is attributes that are connected to it. So this is a policies, this is a classification, and this is where it is in an ontology of this subject area. And also we are now investigating how can we connect BI tools, reporting tools into this open metadata layer. So it is an open source collaboration. And I mentioned that we are selecting Apache Atlas as something to build on, because it's a good way to put our code and have a reference implementation for what we are developing. So depending on, I'm not sure what skills and what hobbies you have, but there's different ways in which you can also get involved in this development of open metadata standard. So you can give us the requirements or use cases. You can come to the Atlas Jira and also look what is there. All the code that is developed, so OMRS and OMASes, are contributed back, so you can see everything. And you can comment if you think you're doing something not the proper way. So that's also the review board where you can give your comments. Or you can pick up OMASes, which are, I think now at least we are planning to have at least 16 for different end users, and develop it yourself and contribute in that way. So that's where the code resides and how we structure that aspect. But there is another aspect that John will tell us about ODPi and what actually this gives you as a subject matter expert.
Sounds good. Thank you. So hopefully that gave you a good understanding of sort of the business drivers, the whys, from a technical aspect, the goals that this is trying to accomplish. And the good thing is with an effort like this, having a diversity of contributors is really the best way that you actually help drive meaningful change within the industry. And we're fortunate enough to have a couple of key vendors. Hortonworks, IBM have been long ODPi supporters. ING, which just joined ODPi, they did a press release on that yesterday. Attunity, which we don't have their logo up here, they recently joined ODPi and they're contributing as well. And we're starting to see a number of other vendors that are showing up on a few of the data governance calls weekly, from the insurance industry, from telecommunications, media, automotive. We're really starting to see some nice healthcare, starting to see some nice cross-collaboration happening and just starting to elevate these use cases. And that's, in our experience, that's how this comes together. The benefactors for this, and Marina touched on this quite a bit, are really in two camps. One is, you, the person who is a data governance professional, you're able to collaborate with other data governance professionals in an open source way. It is a unique opportunity that open source provides you, is a way to collaborate across company lines, even with competitors, on such a foundational piece of being able to transact business better. And as a vendor, everything that we could have described at that top layer there, and the interfaces back into the various libraries, there's a compliance program that we built right around that. And so you'll be able to mark your solution as compliant with this architecture, and that ends up being a selling point as you go back into customers. We have a great track record in ODPi and driving a compliance standard. We've done it in the Hadoop world before and had some really nice uptick out of the gate on that as well. It's a benefit for customers, it's a benefit for vendors, and it's really just a benefit for the entire ecosystem. So we've touched a little bit on this already of sort of where we're at with the roadmap of efforts here. The big driving coming up here is the Apache Atlas 1.0 beta. I believe it was announced here this week. And late June is when we're going to start seeing the actual GA release, with much of this work already starting to get incorporated. Marina was touching on that quite a bit here. There's great opportunities for you to help participate in this work. So if you're on the technical side and you're looking to contribute code to the effort around the Atlas piece, so that's the actual main metadata repository, definitely look at the Apache Atlas project. If you're a metadata professional, or these technologies are important to you in your company, maybe you're a privacy officer, maybe you're working on implementing some of these strategies within your company, and you're willing to help bring your industry expertise. We meet weekly, 2 different threads here. We focus 1 week on compliance tools and packs, so helping build out the compliance. That's kind of more suitable for more of a vendor audience. And then the practitioner subject matter experts so we flip-flop each week. They're at a very Europe-friendly time. They're, I believe, 3 p.m.? Yes. Sorry, I had to do, it's 9 a.m. U.S. Eastern, so 3 p.m. for Europe, 2 p.m. for the UK. Our California friends don't like it because it's 6 a.m. for them, but they still show up. But it's a great opportunity to cross-collaborate with folks. We're starting to get a really nice, diverse group of people on those calls. And you can just learn more. At the very bottom here, there's the URL. You can just go sign up for the email list and just start getting on that. And when you sign up, you'll be also able to grab the calendar invite and drop it on your calendar right away. So, the natural question, and I imagine a number of you have been familiar with ODPi as you've been with the Hortonworks ecosystem for quite some time. Why ODPi? Why ODPi a home for an effort like this? Why a group that focuses on Hadoop standardization and compliance is focusing on data governance? Well, one of the things we did last year is we spent some time and just doing some data analysis, review, talking with customers, doing some polls, and what we found out was the true challenge that's happening in the data space of just getting these technologies adopted. Well, I just take a step back. First off, there's not really great definition of what it means to take this into production. We found varying numbers of production use, and not just by single digits, but Gartner on one side estimates it at 20%. The Hadoop vendors estimated in the 80s. Entirely different spectrums, right? So what we really wanted to do is we wanted to establish a vendor-neutral maturity model for what Hadoop adoption of Hadoop and big data technologies looks like within organizations. We put this out in a white paper last year here. I won't go through the details of this, but the really important thing here is really two pieces. One, a lot of these solutions that even though they're in use by an enterprise, they tend to not be really used across the enterprise. They're very much departmental plays, point solutions. And what we found is that blocker from moving from that solution that's just part of an enterprise to the full enterprise is really predicated on security and governance. To a degree, also operational support. That is, I think we're seeing that getting a lot better here. But that security and governance, how can we help control, how can we provide guidance on the access, how can we properly tag and lineage and monitor this data here as it's coming through? It's an up-team concern, and data governance isn't anything new at all. But when we're talking about the volume of data that's coming through now with these technologies, it's now become really much in the forefront. And with regulations, and I don't know if you heard of this one, it's called GDPR. I got a chuckle out of a German audience. That's great. They're just going to keep coming, right? That's not stopping. And the best thing is, and then also the amount of data isn't stopping. That's going to keep coming. So what can we do from a technology point? Is put the best solutions in place, but use the community to help drive them so it can best serve the community. And when we look at the role of a foundation within here, its goal is to act as a steward for this community, for it to continue to flourish. And we at the Linux Foundation, we basically have this model here of how we look at open source projects and how we look to participate. I mean, the first thing is foundations don't tell open source projects what to do. They're there to support them, to help make them successful and give them the resources they need, and sort of take all of those pieces away so the technologists don't have to worry about that. They worry about making great technology. So we invest at this project aspect. We make sure there's a strong developer community, in this case, a data governance practitioner community. They build out these projects. They build out this open source. And this gets adopted by companies, either as a vendor, this gets embedded into your products, brought into your products. As a customer, you're using it in internal processes. You're using it as a part of your daily work, embedded into your IT systems. And on the success of those, which is generally based upon profits, if you're a vendor, or if you're a company, maybe that's reduced R&D costs. The success of these products in the market pushes more investment back into the projects in both manpower and pure also monetary funds. That's what we look to enable here. We present the home for it, and the community then begins to flourish. So if this has been interesting, you've probably heard a few things about data governance this today. If this is very interesting to you, we really encourage you to check this out. ODPi.org. Check out our website. We have a newsletter. You can just sign up. It's a very lightweight way just to keep on what's going on. If you're very interested in participating in the data governance effort, here's that URL again, odpi.org/project data governance. It talks more in detail about it and how to get involved. We're also having some upcoming webinars. They're going to be talking about pieces of the technology in more detail. You can join the mailing list if you want to get on the weekly calls and help participate in that community. And if you're an organization and data governance driven from a vendor-neutral organization is a very important thing to you, we encourage you to consider membership. And you can look at that website. You can also talk to me. I'll be here the rest of the day. I'm also going to be down in the expo hall at the thing in the middle. What's it called? The Meet the Experts thing, I guess. It's in the middle. It has the meet the experts that people write things on the board. I'll be there this evening, and I'd be encouraged if anybody wants to come and talk about this or just open source in general, I'd be happy to. So with that, I think we've exhausted our time and then some. Or maybe not, we actually have a few minutes left. Are there any questions? And if you do have questions, we've been asked that you can come up to the microphone because this is being recorded. If you don't, then we're just going to restate your question how we think it should be.
No questions.
No questions, that's okay. Oh, go ahead.
Is there a list which products are already automated to connect to Atlas from databases, from BI tools, from whatsoever?
So the question was, is there already products that are currently connecting to Atlas or certified against or compliant with this standard? Go ahead.
Not yet. That's an honest answer from the BI tooling, at least. So you saw that at least from perspective of the IBM metadata repository, that there was one of the metadata repositories. They are developing the connectors that can connect to the open metadata layer. And we're talking to a number of vendors, let's say it this way. And we have a number of POCs that are running, but we don't have anything this is the complete product yet.
Yeah, but I mean, we have a number of vendors that are starting to participate and just kind of get a feel for what it's about and gauge sort of what compliance is. And that's why, if you're a vendor, it's a great time to join because you can influence what the first compliance standards are to hopefully make it as easier for adoption in your product. But we see a number of folks that are really getting interested about
also
this.
Microsoft was on a chart, so Power BI, we are looking now how can this be also connected and integrated.
SaaS's tools are looking to integrate as well,
So most of the work that has been done up to now is to building up this foundation of the open metadata repository services and having the most important OMASs in place. So now it is bringing the vendors, and it's also the question to you, because you also have vendors that you use. If you encourage them to have a look in this open metadata standard and say, well, this is important because this allows us to have a good view of what we have and also have a control of our data, that's how more of vendors get involved.
Yep. Any other questions? I wonder what's going on downstairs.
Nothing.
Go ahead, yes. All right, so I guess to restate get the question so we get it for the recording here. If you're just getting started as a company with metadata principles, what are some good tips and guidelines to help get started?
Yes, get a rich metadata. Also from our perspective, from ING, because we are in different countries, we had to have a business understanding, right? So we had business glossaries that described exactly for different departments what this data item is. And I think to have this federated view, it's quite important that you have this business understanding of it. And look at the Apache Atlas, so you know how to integrate right away.
Bite-sized achievement, it's always, it helps scope things a lot cleaner. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone.